So, French knots. It seems like a lot of you aren't big fans of them. I did a poll on my Instagram a few days ago and lots of you said that French knots are just one of your worst things when it comes to stitching. You don't enjoy doing them and they just end up in a big tangle of thread and don't give you the results that you want. So I thought I'd do a little tutorial for you on this channel all about French knots, kind of like the ultimate guide. And I'm going to show you why French knots are really awesome and how they can add loads of texture into your stitching and loads of lovely little tiny 3D details, which are awesome. And I promise you, by the end of this, you'll get the hang of it and you'll be a French knot wizard or witch or whatever, magical human being making French knots. So yeah, I've got my little assistant Gumi sat behind me. Can you see him? Oh, there he is. So he's going to be helping me today and I'm going to teach you some French knots. So let's get started. First of all, what are French knots? French knots are these tiny little stitches that you can see here that are slightly raised and they give texture to your embroidery work. They look beautiful, especially when you're doing things like florals, and they add loads of tiny little details and they have a really nice 3D effect that's very textural. You can also use them to create texture for abstract work. You can see there's lots of tiny ones there. They contrast really nicely with like flat stitches and they pop out really well. And you can also use them to create shapes. So Gumi's really interested in this one. This is a tree and it's made entirely of French knots with the little bird in there. Just all different shades, loads of different little French knots. Yes, hello. That's why French knots are amazing. They're great for texture, they're fab for tiny little details, and they're really good if you want to create like a shape, just using French knots and make something really textural to stand out from your work. So how do we do them? Right, you're going to need a hoop with a piece of fabric in, and go and get those supplies and I'll show you how to do it. So the most important thing to think of when you're doing French knots is tension. Tension, 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 as that is what's going to give you a really neat knot. So I've drawn some dots here, as you can see. And this is where we're going to be doing our French knots. You don't have to draw dots, I've just done this to make it easier for you to visualise. So let's pick some thread. Let's go with this jazzy pink. So you want to use embroidery floss that is a nice high quality. I like to use DMC, and we're going to use 2 strands of DMC thread because that's how much I normally stitch with. You can use more, you can use less, it's completely up to you, but ideally if you use about 2, it tends to give quite a nice thick knot, I find. So I'll just thread the needle. So I've got my needle threaded. We're going to start by going up through the back of one of the holes. So we're going to go through the back of this hole here, like so. Now, once we've gone through the back, we're going to pull on this piece of thread and hold it between these 2 fingers here. So it's nice and tight. Then you're going to take this needle, put it under this bit of thread here, and with these fingers wrap that thread around. 1 wrap, 2 wraps. However many times you wrap it around your needle is how big your French knot is going to be. So make sure you keep this nice and tight. So don't want to see any of this, tight like that. I think that's where most people go wrong. Then take this needle and point it down, and you're going to go back from where you came, so back through that hole. So keep pulling on this tight, and this is going back through the hole like that. Then on the other side you're going to just pull it through voila, a little French knot. Let's do it again. So we're going to go up through the back, nice and tight, pinch it like this, then take your needle and wrap around. So 1, 2, keep it nice and tight. Don't forget, tension is the name of the game with French knots. Point that needle down back into the hole from where it came. Hold the top of your needle if you need to. Pull tight, keep the tension, push that needle through. Another little French knot. Nice and neat, lovely. Okay, so that's how you do smaller French knots that only use 2 wraps around the needle. So let's have a look at how we do bigger French knots. First of all, I'm just going to snip away my excess thread. Let's get rid of that. And let's do some chunky French knots. So you're going to need some more embroidery thread. Remember, only use 2 strands. Even when you're doing your chunky French knots, you don't need to use more than 2 strands, unless you want to. It's up to you. So I've got my thread, going with blue this time, just to mix it up a bit. And let's go up through the back of one of these dots. So much like before, we're going through the back of the dots. What's that bit of fluff on there? Through the back of the dots, and then we're going to pinch the thread between our fingers, take the needle, pop it underneath, and we're going to wrap it around. So before we wrapped it around twice, this time we're going to wrap it around, let's say 5 times. So underneath, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So remember, keep the tension. It's the most important thing when doing French knots. Keep that tension, especially when you're making a big one. So keep the tension, push the needle back through where it came, all whilst keeping that tension. The tighter it is, the neater it is. And then pull. French knot, nice chunky one. When you're doing chunky French knots, you might find that it's harder to push the needle through because you've got more thread wound around the needle. So just be patient, take your time, and you might need to use a little bit of extra force. Don't be alarmed. Okay, so let's do this one more time. So we're going to go up through the dot, then pinch between your fingers like this, take the needle underneath, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, let's go crazy, 6, 7, doing an even bigger one. So nice and tight tension. You can see how tight it is on the needle, really tight. Then take the needle, twist it, put it back through the hole through which it came, and just keep the tension here. Push. Now there's a lot of thread here, so I might have to pull quite hard. Oof, there we go. Pull, 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 and there we go. A big chunky French knot. So you can see the difference. See how much bigger this one is. Have a look at these little tiny baby ones. So that's how you do a chunky French knot. There are other ways that you can do French knots as well. There's other threads that you can use. So you can also use things such as sparkle thread, which is beautiful, albeit slightly fiddly to use. And you can also use variegated thread. This is great for French knots when you're doing an abstract design and you just want loads of French knots in different colours. So I highly recommend giving variegated thread a go. Sparkle thread looks so effective, but I would say that it doesn't produce the neatest French knots. So unless you're doing tiny French knots. So tiny French knots work really well with sparkle thread, but thick French knots, not so much. So let's look at what are some of the common problems people can have when doing French knots. So One of the main ones that I tend to see that people ask me about are French knots that go a bit loopy. So this can normally happen because you haven't got enough tension. So let me do an example. So we'll do a few twists and then we're going to go down the hole. I've not got much tension, you can see. And my French knot then looks a bit like this. Now, there's not many ways that you can save this. You can try to do another French knot on top if you feel confident. And if you're not looking for a small little detail, so you could do a French knot on top of this one and kind of get your needle in and hook in the bits that you're not that keen on. So you can kind of do a French knot on top of the one that went a bit loopy. However, this isn't the neatest way to sort it out. Normally, if I do a French knot like this, which does happen from time to time if I'm a bit sleepy, and definitely happened to me a lot when I was first starting out doing French knots. So let me do another loopy one again. So say I've got another slightly loopy one, you can see it's got some slight loops on the edge of it. Doesn't look that great. I tend to cut it out, if I'm honest. If I'm brutally honest, I tend to cut it out. So French knots are really easy to cut out. You just need to pull them up from your work like this and then take a snip, take another snip. That's the knot gone. And on the back, you just need to go in and lift, and it's gone. Ready for you to start again, do another French knot. Another issue that I see quite often is that people can put too much thread on the needle, so too many strands, which then creates a knot. And the other one is where people wrap it around too many times, and then it can get a bit out of control and you end up with just a mess. So I'll show you that one quickly as well. So let's go back up like that, and let's do loads and loads of twists. So many twists. Ah. And then we're going to go back down the hole. So if you've got loads of twists and you haven't got good tension, then you can kind of get this weird ring effect. See, like this. So it's not really a knot, it's more like a little ring, which, I mean, it doesn't look completely unattractive, but if that's not what you're after, it's not ideal. Again, I would just unthread the needle, and you can use your needle to pull it up like this, and then just snip it out. You could even use that knot as the base of your thread, ready to start again. So that's just my quick guide to French knots. I'm not a professional by any means, I've just taught myself, and I hope that my little tips can help you get to grips with them, because I really do love doing French knots now. I hated them at the beginning, I found them really tough to do, so I know how you feel. But once you get that technique down and are able to do the tension, then I'm sure you'll find that it comes together a lot easier. And you can make some really cool things. I showed you at the beginning, but you can use them for loads of little textured details like this, which look great in abstract work. You can use them for creating shapes like this. This is entirely French knots, this tree. And you can also use them for little tiny details that are really delicate like this. So yeah, happy stitching. I hope this helps. and join me again soon for another stitching lesson or behind the scenes or whatever. Okay, bye. Have a lovely rest of the week. Bye.